Time now for another look at what's grabbing headlines in the press with Solange Mujan. Solange, you are starting off again with the situation in Afghanistan. Thousands of people still need to be evacuated before that August 31st deadline.
Yeah, and I'd say if there is a sort of common thread to this press review, it is about time. For there are around-the-clock flights going out of Afghanistan, evacuating tens of thousands of people, and that has been going on for the past 12 days. But according to Libération, not everyone is going to make it out on time, and the French paper calls Afghanistan right now the trap, le piège, with thousands of people still remaining stuck. And in Libération's editorial entitled Shame, the paper says that the U.S. has failed in its withdrawal and drawn EU nations along with it in a shameful mismanagement of its exit strategy. But the paper argues that it is, quote, never too late to show a minimum of humanity, end quote, by opening up the EU's arms to Afghan refugees. And those refugees, they are coming, not only by flights, but also by land. As the Eye tells us, the UK's Secretary of Defence has urged Afghans and Brits who want to leave to avoid the airport because of the increasingly worrisome security threat there. And if possible, to head for land borders to escape.
And on that security threat, Solange, the press is also discussing how European nations are bracing for a surge of immigrants from Afghanistan.
Yeah, the Wall Street Journal, it tells us the EU leaders have been discussing how to avoid a repeat of the mismanagement of the 2015 Syria influx, with divisions and a populist backlash that it created in Europe. But the roadmap of how to welcome and to resettle refugees is still far from clear, Politico tells us. After a G7 meeting, even the use of the word roadmap in a communique was disputed, and resettling immigrants, well, it was actually the easier of the topics, the site tells us, with world leaders grappling with time running out and with dwindling hopes of an extension being possible.
And Solange, cartoonists have really latched on to this notion of time running out.
Yeah, in a cartoon entitled The Sands of Time, the cartoonist Martin Rowson takes on this legacy of the U.S. imperialism. And in his cartoon you have Biden holding up Lady Liberty's torch and trying to plug up the sand in the hourglass, one that holds within it memories of past American wars. And Patrick Chapat as well draws Taliban fighters reminding U.S. soldiers that there is less than a week to go, and U.S. forces saying, quote, "I just hate those calendar alerts," expressing here the anxiety over the pressing need to get people out in time.
And let's change gears now again, Solange, but on a similar theme, the upcoming release of that U.S. intelligence report on the origins of COVID-19.
Yeah, here too, the message is essentially time is running out. With the declassified version of the U.S. intel report expected soon, the American media is reporting already that its findings are inconclusive, that the investigators of the World Health Organization report, they've penned an open letter plea in Nature magazine. They say, quote, that the search for the origins of SARS-CoV-2 is at a critical juncture and that the window is, quote, rapidly closing on biological feasibility of finding its origin, end quote. But the Chinese press, well, it's already on the offensive. The Global Times, it has a series of cartoons and articles pegging the U.S. report of failure. That, as we can see in Liu Ru's cartoon, it's the WHO that's being driven, in Beijing's eyes, of course, by Uncle Sam.
And now, Solange, on that similar theme of time, but in a different interpretation, tell us what it's like to do time in a Russian prison.
Yeah, and it's not just about anyone doing time, but it's Alexei Navalny doing time in a Russian interview. And it's not just any interview, but his first extensive one since his arrest in January. The Russian dissident told the New York Times in a 54-page handwritten answers that what life is like behind bars, where for more than 8 hours a day he is forced to watch Russian state TV. He wrote, quote, "You might imagine tattooed muscle men, but you need to imagine something like a Chinese labor camp, where everybody marches in line and where video cameras are hung everywhere. There is a constant control and a culture of snitching," end quote.
And finally, Solange, you have found an article on looking back in time.
Yeah, this is about something called the Great Unconformity, or why in some places in the Grand Canyon there are millions of years of missing rock. More specifically, why rock layers that are some 520 million years old sit directly on top of ones that are 1.4 billion years old. We don't know what happened to that missing rock in between, but Vice tells us that scientists now believe this might be from erosion due to fault lines. But they're still trying to figure out exactly what and how this quote-unquote geological brain wipe happened, and those discoveries that their research could lead to important discoveries about the Earth's climate over time.
Well, Solange, I admit I was just recently at the Grand Canyon. In between the 520 million years, the 1.4 billion years, it all kind of meshes together.
True, but you do see lines and you wonder, okay, what era was that?
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, with that wonderfully time-themed press review, that concludes this edition, but do stay tuned for more news and analysis coming up on France 24. Thank you for watching.